I was making a delivery and was crossing the train tracks in an unfamiliar town. Along the tracks were those cone-shaped pine trees used as windbreakers or privacy walls. I couldn't see through them at all because they were so thick. Slowly, I crossed the tracks. There were no red lights flashing, the oncoming traffic was blasting through there, and I had no reason to believe it wasn't safe to cross. Needless to say, I began crossing the tracks immediately past the trees. I looked left and saw a train, with its light on, coming at me from about 40 yards away. I could feel the engine thumping. I gunned it. In an automatic, this means you go nowhere fast. Fortunately for me, I made it. Barely. I looked back over my shoulder and saw that it was a stupid rail yard and they were doing a turnaround and had parked that train there out of the way. It sucked. Big time. Welcome back. Dark Recaps here with another story for you. Subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on 3 creepy stories every week. Let's continue. Feasting on the side of the road. Quote, years ago in the late 90s, I was on my way from the house in Central Texas, heading to Laredo to pick up a load. It was early morning, around 4 or 5. I had just come off a string of days at home, so I know I wasn't tired. I am on one of those 2-lane winding roads in the absolute middle of bumfuck nowhere. As I'm driving, I see something on the side of the road, at the edge of my high beams. At first I just thought it was roadkill, as is usually the case. As I get closer, I see that in fact it is roadkill, and there's something crouching over the deer carcass. I remember thinking, either this guy's taking the antlers as a trophy, or he's fucking sick. As I got closer, I could now see that this guy's eating the fucking deer. He's pulling chunks of meat from the stomach and bringing them up to his face. At this point he stops mid-motion and looks up at me. Not at my truck, but at me. He, or it, stands up, and that's when I see that it's fucking huge, brown, and covered in hair. I remember thinking at this point, oh fuck. This thing is standing on the tiny shoulder, looking at me. By this point, maybe 3 seconds have passed and I'm about to point in the road he's standing at. I didn't even think of stopping. In fact, I'm starting to lay on it and get the hell out of there. As I'm passing it, it's looking at me. Again, not at the truck. It's looking through the driver's side windshield at me. He obviously had the intelligence to know that there's a driver in here and knows where I'm sitting. As I start to pass him, I can still see its head above the hood of an old needle-nose Pete, old truck design where the hood goes straight out from the windshield, known for being tall and difficult to see around. This thing is fucking giant. I remember seeing what looked like human intelligence in its eyes. It scares the shit out of me. End quote. The last moment between life and death. Quote, my dad told me and my brothers this story when we were growing up, and it's always stuck with me, particularly on long drives when I'm feeling a bit sleepy. The first time I remember hearing it was after I asked him if angels were real. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. He drove trucks decades ago, before I was born and before labor laws around limits and brakes were more standard. I'm assuming it's different now. He'd fairly regularly accepted calls that would extend his shift to where he was driving 24 to 36 hours or more, without a break longer than a quick bathroom or fast food stop. My dad has a pretty mathematical brain. He's the type to make up logic puzzles out of something totally mundane just for fun. Whenever we were driving around town, he'd regularly ask me things like how long would it take us to get from home to the store if we were going 30 miles per hour, but had to stop for 5 minutes in the middle because a family of kittens were crossing the road, etc. He'd come up with similar equations for himself while he was driving solo that involved things he was seeing like the odometer, mileage markers, the time, and then he could test his speed based on the equation, etc. One night, after having already driven a particularly long day, he noticed his eyes getting droopier, and the whole roll down the window and blast the music up thing didn't seem to be helping much. It was a rainy night on a pretty windy mountain road without a shoulder to pull over safely, so he started doing those logic games out loud to keep alert and awake. He was saying something to the effect of, "I just passed mile marker 146, so what time will it be when I reach 200? If I'm going 55 miles per hour, then he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt his head do the nod jerk thing, which woke him up with a gasp. He opened his eyes to see he was driving straight towards mile marker 158, which would have sent his whole truck tumbling down a random-ass mountain ravine. He was able to correct the course safely back, but it was a matter of seconds between that reality and certain death. He insists to this day that he slept through 12 miles of windy mountain road going 60+ miles per hour, only to wake up right at the last moment between life and death. The story usually ends with him tearing up saying, "I don't know if there's angels, but I know there's something bigger going on in this universe than our human brains have been able to understand yet. If I wouldn't have woken up right when I did, you kids wouldn't be here today, and that's something that feels pretty close to spiritual." End quote. The Demon on the Road. Quote, "My dad has several stories from hauling logs in Idaho, driving trucks through Utah and Nevada. My favorite is from actually just in his pickup going through Utah. He said there was a light keeping pace with him out in the desert on a moonless night. It kept pace for a minute before it disappeared and his truck turned off. He stopped and turned it on and pulled off at the next diner. The folks in the diner called it a common occurrence. The creepiest is when he was hauling logs in Idaho and was coming down from near the Coeur d'Alene area during a snowy winter night. He was putting on chains before heading down steep grades, and said all of the hair stood up on his body. It felt like there was something watching him. Halfway down the switchbacks, he saw a large figure standing on a 20-foot tall embankment. As he got closer, it jumped down, and the shoulders were as tall as the cab. In a single bound, it leaped down and then leaped over to the other side of the embankment. At the time, he thought it was a Sasquatch. Now he says it was probably a demon trying to make him crash. He didn't stop to remove the chains until he was well away from the mountain." End quote. Creepy time gap. Quote, "My grandfather told me the story about how he was driving west to east along an empty stretch of road in southern South Dakota. He stopped at a stop sign at an intersection with nothing in sight. No buildings and no other vehicles. Then there was a bright light that hit him. He looked up and saw a bunch of blinking lights. Next thing he knew, he was at the counter of a diner about an hour down the road. It was about 6 hours later and he had no idea what had happened. He asked the person at the diner when he came in, and the guy told him he came in about 10 minutes ago and just started drinking coffee without talking much. My grandpa asked him what had happened, and the guy said something like, 'Yep, that happens around here sometimes.' Nothing weird ever happened to him again. He avoided that area for the rest of his life. He said he doesn't believe in aliens and doesn't know what happened, but I had a suspicion he thought he had been abducted and just never accepted it. He told me never to tell this story to other people, but he died years ago and most of the people who knew him are dead, so I figured it was okay." End quote. The truck stop. Quote, "I was at a truck stop in Arizona. I was pulling through the fuel island, and right as I was about to leave, roughly 15 cop cars came flying into the parking lot with a SWAT van. They surrounded a truck that was already parked for the night. I heard later that the driver had lost a tire or something off his trailer and it had killed a guy on the side of the road. Don't know how true that story was, but it sounded possible. At the old Flying J in El Paso, I had pulled through the fuel island and was filling out logs and whatnot, after filling up when someone started screaming help on the CB. It's not unusual to hear kids fucking around or whatever, but this sounded like a full-grown man and didn't sound fake. It only happens for about 15 to 20 seconds and then silence. Some people started asking the guy where he was, but never got a response. Suddenly another big rig in the parking lot starts to take off, right as a couple of cop cars pull into the truck parking area. The big rig takes out a smaller sign and then jumps a curb out into the service road for I-10. Turns out a student got pissed at his instructor and stabbed him before leading the cops on a short high-speed chase. End quote. Spooky Coyotes. Quote, I was in rural Maine looking for a lumber mill just before sunset. It took hours to get out there because Maine is riddled with these narrow, windy roads that try and get as close as possible to every building in every village from US 1 to Canada. So I pull in just as the last guy is leaving. I ask him where to park and say I'll see him in the morning. I park my truck in this fairly large gravel parking lot with thick forest right on all sides. There are no visible artificial lights except for my truck and my flashlight. After I get parked, I go and sit out in a lawn chair and just enjoy the warm night air and look at the absolutely beautiful night sky. It was a rare treat to enjoy basically no light pollution. As I'm looking at the stars, like a switch was flipped, what sounds like 50 coyotes, 60 feet away, start howling like mad. It is at this point I nope right back into the truck and don't open the door until sunrise. The town of West Salem, Wisconsin has always kind of given me the shivers. It's like it's both empty and full of people at the same time. Nothing concrete, just feels like things aren't quite right in that town. Edit, I thought of a third one. I was at the Lowe's distribution center in the Washington Courthouse, Ohio. I was parked on the street, just outside the gate getting ready to head to a truck stop when a black cat crossed the triple railroad track in front of me. Call me superstitious, but you had better bet that I backed up, turned around, and went the other way. End quote. Let me know in the comments if you have ever experienced something disturbing like this. I'd be interested to read about your experience. Thanks for watching, and please consider leaving a like on this video. If you enjoy the content, hitting that subscribe button doesn't cost you anything. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.